Hey everybody, how's it going? And welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. We are back, we are live, we are reacting to that wonderful victory up at St. James's Park. It was late, but my word, was it great. Arsenal picking up all 3 points in what was absolutely 100% a must-win game. A big thank you to all of you that have stayed with me because we did try and stream this just a few moments ago. Funny that as soon as I started talking about the officials, the connection just went. Who knows? The PGMOL are everywhere. I'm just kidding. Anyway, let's hope that we get through a show without any technical gremlins because nothing winds me up more, especially when it's dark and it's raining and I've got to walk all the way down the garden. Not that I live in a particularly big place, but you got to go back down the garden, which means I've got to put my shoes back on and go into the house and see what's going on with the route and then resetting. And you got to come all the way back down here. And then sometimes it's not even working yet. Anyway, forget the technical gremlins. Today is a happy day. It's a happy, happy day because Arsenal have gone up to St. James's Park in what was absolutely categorically 100% a must-win game. And they've taken all 3 points despite coming up against so much adversity on the day, despite coming up against one of the poorest, I beg your pardon, refereeing displays that we've seen in a while. And it feels like we're saying that a lot when Arsenal are involved. What I really want to know and what I really want answered, okay? So like when you go online, okay, you often read that Jared Gillett is a Liverpool fan and that Jared Gillett is not allowed to referee Liverpool games. Now, let me be completely honest and transparent on this, right? I don't even know if that's true. I don't actually know for a fact that Jared Gillett is a Liverpool fan. And on top of that, I'm not even sure that he's banned from doing Liverpool games or not appointed to Liverpool games for that reason, for the PGMOL to kind of avoid any scrutiny and any heat on that. So I know, because I know a lot of people are going to bring that up in the live chat, which is why I just wanted to touch on it. But I do find it odd, regardless of whether he's got, allegiances to another Premier League club or not. I do find it weird that he's involved in so many of our games. Like, that can't be right, surely. Like, whether it's as the referee, the VAR, the fourth official, the assistant VAR, he just always seems to be involved in our games. And that doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me. Anyway, what we're going to do on today's pod is we are going to wax lyrical about this unbelievable Arsenal side, this incredible squad that we have, and this incredible squad that on the day, Mikel Arteta used to perfection. Okay, we're going to get into all of that. But before we do that, we have to cover off a few of the negatives. And when I say negatives, I'm not even talking about Arsenal. I'm talking about some of the decisions. I'm talking about some of the big talking points from the match. We're going to cover them. We have to cover them. We have to discuss them. I figured the best way to put together a nice, enjoyable pod would be to get all the moaning and frustration out of the way. And then we can move on to talk about Arsenal's performance, which on the day was just superb in so many ways. Okay, so we're going to do that. I also have to, before we dive into things, just apologize because I know that there was a few of you that were asking for and hoping that we were going to do a watch along on today's game. And I did say when we did the Port Vale one in midweek that there was a chance that we'd do one today. I've got to be completely honest, open and transparent. There's a couple of reasons why we didn't do it. First of all, I was absolutely shattered. I commentated on a game yesterday in the National League. Really good fun. But I also, in doing that, missed half of a family wedding. So then I had to drive as fast as I could, obviously not breaking any speed limits, back to North London to attend the wedding, where I was greeted by my 3 children at the wedding who were all on one because they were tired and wanted to go home and wanted to go sleep. But given that I'd only just turned up, I couldn't really leave. Yeah, that was challenging. That obviously messed them up routine-wise all day. And then this afternoon, I had the absolute honor and pleasure of commentating on a Serie A game. I covered the Roma game this afternoon, which meant I didn't have to worry about Arsenal all day, or I had a distraction from Arsenal for some time to kind of take my mind off the big game and all the rest of it, which was a good thing. But by the time I finished that, which was around about, 30 minutes before the Arsenal game kicked off, I just didn't have it in me to sit and talk for another hour and a half non-stop. And then when I went inside the house to make a cup of coffee, my son comes up to me and he says, Dad, yes, son. Are we going to watch the Arsenal game together? Can we watch it together? And I thought, how can I say no? It's all part of his education process. It's part of his development. He needs me. He needs me. And how could I turn my son down to do a watch along? So that's why we didn't do it. But yeah, anyway, let's talk about the game. Let's start with the emotions that we're coming away from St. James's Park feeling. I'm feeling proud. I'm feeling buoyed. I'm feeling excited. And I'm feeling a little bit relieved as well. And you might say, well, we got exactly what we deserved today. It was a really good performance. We were up against it as far as some of the refereeing decisions were concerned. So, why do you feel relieved? Like, it's justice. It's what we deserved. But what I didn't want, right? And I got to be honest, when we pulled it back to 1-1, when Mikel Merino came off the bench and got us out of trouble, I was sitting there going, I'll take that. Like, just given the circumstances, like, we've had a clear penalty denied. We've then gone a goal down. We've come across a Nick Pope who was in inspired form. And I just thought to myself, I'll take that. Let's just take that and let's just get out of here. And we've made up a point on Liverpool. But then you go and get all three. And only when we got the second goal did it dawn on me what the kind of narrative would have been if Arsenal had only got a point. It would have been, again, well, they didn't win when it really matters. Liverpool dropped points. Liverpool were there for the taking. Arsenal really ought to have made that count. Arsenal really ought to have taken advantage, but yet again, they didn't. And people would completely ignore the fact that, in my opinion, we were robbed of a clear spot kick. They would completely ignore the fact that, so many things went against us, that we created the chances, which doesn't fit in with the narrative of Mikel Arteta as a defensive manager. And all we do is, sit behind the ball and park the bus, etc., etc. All of that would have been ignored. And it would have just been typical Arsenal. Liverpool lose, big opportunity for Arsenal to close the gap, and they failed to do it. Now, let me say this. If you had told me at the start of the season that 5 games in, or 6 games in now, is it 6 games in now? Is it 5 or 6? 6 games in, I think. Anyway, I'm tired. Forget about that. Forget about the detail here, okay? If you'd have told me at the start of the season, 6 games in, that we would be 2 points behind Liverpool, given that we were going to go to Liverpool, that we were going to go to Old Trafford, that we were going to go to St. James's Park, and that we were going to play Manchester City. If you offered me that then, I would have taken it with both hands. And I mean that. Now, there'll be people out there that say, oh, you're just saying that because that's where we are, blah, 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 and it's not good enough and we should have had more points. No, I'm realistic. Okay, we made a lot of changes going into this season. A lot of new players. A lot of players still finding their feet. A lot of players still building those connections, those relationships. It was always going to be the case that we weren't going to be at our brilliant best. Factor in that we've had an awful start to the season. It was always likely we were going to be a little behind. And I said to you guys on a podcast last week, look, if we are, 2 points behind, I'm fine with it. If it was more, it's not great. But I always expected us to be a little bit behind the curve just for that reason. But anyway, I'm feeling good, proud, all of those things that I've just explained. But I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't frothing at the mouth at certain points in this game. Because once again, Arsenal on the receiving end of some quite ludicrous decisions. VAR was brought in apparently to step in when there was a clear or obvious error made. I'm not really sure how them essentially over-analyzing and looking at situations with a microscope, desperately trying to find a reason to take back the penalty award. I'm not sure how that is correcting the clear and obvious. There was not a single person in the world that when Nick Pope brought Viktor Gyokeres down went, oh, but he's got a touch on the ball. No. And the thing is as well, right, if we're going to talk about the touch that Nick Pope gets, we've got to be honest about it. Okay, we've got to be honest about how that touch comes about. That's not because Nick Pope comes racing out of his goal and makes this unbelievable tackle on Viktor Gyokeres. The only reason the ball comes off of Nick Pope, whose foot, by the way, is nowhere bloody near it as he attempts to make a challenge, is because Viktor Gyokeres has kicked it against him. Okay, whether the ball comes off of Nick Pope's foot or not, He has clearly impeded Viktor Gyokeres, and that is quite frankly a ludicrous decision. So then the game goes on, and not long after that, and I'll come on to talk about the way we played up until that point because I thought we were outstanding. Then we go and concede a goal. Now, I've seen some Arsenal fans online sort of saying, well, there was a foul from Voltemade on Gabriel. I love Gabriel, and we're going to talk about our archangel, Gabriel, a little bit later on in the pod. But the way he went down when sort of touched by Voltemade like that was, I got to say, embarrassing. Okay, for a big, powerful, intimidating centre-half like that to go down that easily, it's laughable. Okay, but that was kind of my initial reaction to it. When I started to think about it at halftime, I thought to myself, well, if Gabriel's realised that he's lost the flight of the cross, if he's realised that he's not getting to the ball, if he's realised that Voltemade is going to win the header and he feels something, why not go down and why not try and win something for your team? Okay, so while when it goes against you, you come out of that type of situation looking a little bit silly. And that was certainly the case for Gabriel here today. I honestly think that in that scenario, if there's a chance that you can get something, once you've realized that you're not going to be able to get ahead on the ball the way that you want to, then try it. And people are going to laugh at you and people are going to point the finger at you and all the rest of it. But I thought he was, I thought he was just trying to be crafty there. Anyway, then later on in the game, and in between these major incidents, by the way, there was countless fouls against us that were not given. Joe Linton somehow made it to 80 minutes without a yellow card when he probably could have had two prior to that. He should have had one in the first minute. Apparently, putting two hands on people's backs is absolutely fine, as long as it's at St. James's Park, where the referees arrive, they open their bags, they pull out an alternative rule book, and they swap it with the one that is kept in stock at St. James's Park. That's what it feels like anyway. That's what it feels like, legitimately. And then there's a Newcastle appeal for a penalty a little bit later on in the game. Now, when I saw the ball come off of Gabriel's arm, I thought, oh my God, here we go. But in all honesty, if you are going to argue that Nick Pope's deflection on the ball has made a difference and exonerates him of the crime that he committed at the other end of the pitch earlier on in the game, therefore you are saying that deflections matter, then you have to take into consideration the deflection off of Gabriel as he makes the block tackle before the ball flings up and hits him in the arm. Do you see what I mean? You have to show consistency. And I think, right, that, you know, and take my Arsenal hat off for a minute, I'm absolutely 100% giving the Gyokeres penalty if I'm a neutral and if it's in another game. And I'm definitely not giving the Gabriel one, because the Gabriel one is someone who's made a good block tackle being incredibly unfortunate in the way that the ball ricochets up on him. Why should he be penalized for making a good contribution and a good tackle? Whereas with Nick Pope, he's made a terrible challenge. It's mistimed. It's poor. It's really, really bad. And he's got lucky. Why should he get out of jail because of deflection that he hasn't instigated, by the way? Gabriel instigated the deflection because he went in and made the challenge. Whereas you look at Nick Pope and he's just got his leg out and Gyokeres just kicks the ball against it. It's you know, they wouldn't dare give that after, I think, the recognition at halftime that maybe they overanalyzed the whole Gyokeres thing. I mean, this is what the PGMOL do, and this is what the referees do. They will look and look and look and look until they can find something. And that, unfortunately, right, is just not what VAR was brought in to do. And it is spoiling the game. You know, I was a big advocate of VAR because there were too many clear and obvious errors happening over and over and over again. But this is not how I wanted to see it used. And this is not how most football fans want to see it used. We've got into a really dangerous space with VAR. And not only is it like disrupting the flow of games, not only is it impacting on the outcome of games, we're not even getting more of the big decisions right. There's still so many that we're sitting there arguing. And also, like, if you go back to last week, where Robert Sanchez came out and made that challenge at Old Trafford, the ball deflected off of him, but it was still a foul. If you go back to, I don't know if it was last season or the season before, when William Saliba made that challenge at Brighton and the ball came off of his head, and he put his head in, didn't he? And the ball came off of his head. And they went, oh, yeah, he's made contact, but it don't really matter. It's inconsequential contact. That's what we were told. Well, Pope's contact here was completely inconsequential. So I just want to see a bit of consistency in the way that these laws are applied. And we just don't get it. We especially don't get it at St. James's Park. But anyway, we're not going to moan anymore. We're going to talk about the positives, because Arsenal were fantastic today. Before I continue, though, a big shout out to my friend Tez, who's just started a new football podcast called Subbed Off Early. Go and check it out. It's fantastic. Click on his name in the chat box and it will take you over to the channel. Make sure you give it a subscribe and have a listen. Tez is a fantastic football coach. He's got some great views and opinions on the game, and he's just started a podcast. So go over there and check it out. A massive shout out to the guys over there. Right, short pause, and let's talk about all the positives. We can just wax lyrical about Arsenal for the next 40 minutes or so. The performance was truly outstanding, wasn't it? It was brilliant. From start to finish, we were so good in pretty much every department. We stood up to the challenge that Newcastle United brought when they came forward most of the time. You know that he can get on top of you at St. James's Park. You know that once they get going, it can be really, really difficult to sort of manage the storm, if you like. Mikel Arteta was under a bit of pressure going into this game to, as people put it, take the handbrake off. How many times have we heard that in the last week? And you know what? Fair play to him, because he did. He did. He named a much more attack-minded side. He named a side that excited us. And that side went out on the pitch and showed brilliance. It really, really did. If we go through the team very, very quickly, obviously David Raya in goal, outstanding again. Timber, Mosquera, Gabriel, and Calafiori started at the back. It was interesting that he started Christian Mosquera. I didn't see that coming, I've got to be honest. But Mikel pre-match talked about, what's his name? It's gone out of my head for a second. I just read a comment that made me laugh and it distracted me. I'm so sorry. Saliba was out, and Saliba was out and on the bench because Mikel Arteta talked about him still sort of recovering and trying to find his way back fully from that ankle problem that he's been dealing with in recent weeks. Mosquera, I didn't worry when I saw his name on the team sheet, because I think he's been so impressive this season. I think we have to remember that Mosquera is still young. And if my mind serves me correctly, or if my memory serves me correctly, I said about a week ago that with Mosquera, there's going to be moments where you're reminded that he's still quite young, that he's still quite raw, that he's still got a way to go in terms of being the finished article. I actually didn't like the fact that he was subbed off at halftime the way he was, because it made him look like a bit of a scapegoat. Because if you go back to the Newcastle United goal, it all stems from initially a sliced, poor sort of attempt to work the ball back to the goalkeeper from Christian Mosquera. So then he gets hooked at halftime. But Saliba coming on, it did make a difference. It did make a difference, because I thought we were better at progressing the ball after that. We were up against it at the start of the second half. There was some more Newcastle United pressure. And obviously, at this stage in their careers, William Saliba is better equipped to handle that. And he's better equipped to support Gabriel to his left and Jurriën Timber to his right. So I didn't really have a problem with the change, because the change helped us. But I also was a little bit wary and a little bit worried about the message that it sends. And not so much to Christian Mosquera himself, because I'd imagine, maybe not in the heat of the game, but at least afterwards, maybe on the coach home, maybe in the dressing room afterwards, Mikel will sit down with Christian Mosquera and explain to him, look, these are the reasons that I had to make this change. And I don't think it was solely because, he played a poor back pass, which led to a corner, which led to Newcastle eventually scoring a goal. I don't think it was that. Like Zemis in the chat says that he felt that Mosquera was a bit down. I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe it's possible. He's a young man who demands a lot from himself, and has obviously managed to get a lot out of himself because he's played so many games for Valencia. He's coming to Arsenal. He's fitting brilliantly. He's reminded me a little bit of what Saliba was like when he first arrived at Arsenal. We weren't sure at the time as to whether or not he was ready and good enough, and very, very quickly we were all convinced, weren't we? So, yeah, I think maybe there was an element of that to it. But I kind of like at halftime when that change was made and then they panned to Mosquera sitting on the bench, I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to see the kids scapegoated here, particularly if we don't go on to win the game. Now that we've won the game, it's kind of a non-issue, but I did think it was just worth bringing up and raising. I think he's an excellent, excellent player. He made a mistake. It's okay. We got out of jail. In terms of that first half an hour, I thought that was as well as Arsenal have played all season, and actually by quite some distance. The way we were cutting through them with some wonderful passing football, incisive stuff, quick tempo, attacking the spaces, getting runners forward. Off the ball, it was very, very clear that Declan Rice was going to sit and help Martin Zubimendi out a little bit more. And the pair of them today were fantastic. We'll get onto that in a little bit. But I also love Rice's energy to just burst forward. And that's, for me, we can talk about his free kicks, his corners, and all the rest of it. And we do talk about that stuff a lot. But for me, it's his athleticism that has him standing out above so many others. The guy is an absolute machine. The way he eats up the ground in front of him is just bonkers to me. And he played a massive role getting up and down the pitch today. I thought he was probably up there potentially as Arsenal's man of the match. I thought he was really that good. Eberechi Eze in a central position was just a joy to watch. The shoot on sight policy that he adopts it's brilliant, isn't it? Because it's something that we don't really have at Arsenal. Like there were phases and points and times maybe in the past where Martin Odegaard would do that a little bit more, but that just doesn't seem to be his game so much these days. Whereas you had Eze hanging around in those central positions just off of Gyokeres, getting close to Gyokeres at the right times, but knowing when to just drop off him at the right points as well, receiving balls under difficult circumstances, plucking them out of the air with his weaker left foot, doing it with his right foot and getting venomous, fierce shots off. And he was very, very unlucky not to score because he forced two magnificent saves out of Nick Pope in that first half. He was brilliant. I also think that off the ball, he worked incredibly hard as well. And where I sort of spoke in the last couple of weeks about maybe, Mikel not fully trusting him yet in terms of what he brings to the table off the ball, hence why we were going with sort of Merino in midfield and just going for that slightly different dynamic rather than trusting Eze. I think today was a real good opportunity for Eze to show Mikel that, in the biggest games away from home, yes, my primary objective is to get on the ball and make things happen. My primary objective is to be a threat in the opposition half. But you know what? If you need me to muck in, if you need me to dig in, I can do that as well. And I thought, he sort of really made a case for himself to continue in that role. And listen, it's great to see Odegaard back. And when he came on the pitch, I thought he was very good. And I quite liked him sitting in a slightly deeper role and dictating play. But that just worked for me because of the personnel that we had on the pitch at that point and at that time. It was obviously some very, very offensive coaching from Mikel, into not offensive in terms of he upset people, but in terms of how attack-minded it was. Because, we ended up bringing Odegaard on for Zubimendi. And we were really kind of throwing, as Gary Neville put it, the kitchen sink at it. It's amazing, though, because I saw a tweet from James Benge a little bit earlier on, and it made me laugh because I thought this exact thing in the moment when I heard it. Now, I don't normally watch the games from home. I don't always get the Sky commentary in real time. I normally, when I watch the games back, I normally watch them on Arsenal.com because I can't be bothered actually to listen to the biased nonsense that comes sometimes our way. But James Benge said, according to Gary Neville, Arsenal had the handbrake on last week when they put a defender on after their equaliser. Today, when they put a defender on again after their equaliser, Apparently, they threw the kitchen sink at it. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, that there isn't really that much thought that goes into some of these throwaway comments. Now, Gary Neville's a good analyst. He is, and he's a very, very clever man as well. I've met him on multiple occasions. I've done a couple of shoots with him. I know what Gary Neville is like, okay? And he's too smart a man to be throwing around sort of that kind of lazy analysis with the view or with the hope that it becomes viral and it becomes a soundbite. That's unfortunately what modern day football coverage has become. I'll give you a great example today, right? So I actually want to show you this. It's a bit off topic from the game, but I've been meaning to show you guys this. I did say to myself that I would show you on tomorrow's pod. So let me do it now, actually, just while I've got you here. Hold on a second. So let me just share my screen with you. Hold on. So on Thursday, I was on the TalkSport 2 social with Ollie Klink, who's a Newcastle fan, by the way, but he's a top lad, really, really good guy, fantastic radio presenter, knows his stuff. We always have fascinating conversations, okay? And we recorded what's called the TalkSport Daily Podcast, which is a daily podcast that TalkSport put out, and it covers a variety of subjects, whatever's hot in the news. And we, a couple of days in advance, recorded this episode that was going to go out this morning, talking about Mikel Arteta. We talked about the conundrum that he had in midfield without Martin Odegaard. What's the right balance? How do you go about finding it? What does taking the handbrake off actually mean? We talked about the fact that it's very, very early on in the season and there's no need to go overboard on any of the Arsenal analysis at this stage. And I actually spent the best part of, I think it was a 17, 18-minute episode defending Mikel Arteta and saying, look, there's things I would do differently. I didn't agree with the lineup that he picked against Manchester City, etc., etc. But actually, we shouldn't even be entertaining the conversation of him leaving or him being relieved of his duties. And then TalkSport, who, that's an awful freeze frame, but TalkSport, who we know, and I know because I work there a lot, like a bit of clickbait. Look at the tweet that they put out. And I'm not happy about this. And I will be bringing this up when I go in this week. Brand new TalkSport Daily Podcast. And this is the question on the tweet. Is Mikel Arteta feeling the pressure? Harry Symeou and Ollie Klink debate whether it's time for Arteta to leave Arsenal. Listen now via the link below. Let me tell you this. You can go and listen to that entire episode, and the idea or the notion that Mikel Arteta should leave was not even discussed. Wasn't even discussed. Wasn't even discussed. But that's what people do when it comes to Arsenal. They want to click. They want to clip us up. They want to create clickbait. They want to create click rage, whatever you call it. And the amount of people that messaged me today going, I'm really disappointed in you, Harry. This is not like you to say something like that. And I'm like, I didn't say it. I didn't say it. I had a bit of a lay-in today and I woke up to a number of messages. I was like, I did not say that. Anyway, moving on. Let's get back to the game. So we conceded the Voltemada goal, which was a really, really frustrating one. You know what? Because we started the pod before, I can't even remember what I've covered off and what I haven't. So I'm working my way through the list. If I repeat myself on anything, let me know. Just text or just write repeat in the live chat. So I talked about the brilliant sort of first half an hour. We talked a lot in the week about what taking the handbrake off looks like. Rumble says in the chat, when you asked us during the week, what does taking the handbrake off look like? This is exactly what it looks like. This is exactly how we played today. And yeah, look, we had lots of attacking players on the pitch, lots of creatives on the pitch. Eze playing centrally was a massive part of that. Trossard in from the start. I wasn't crazy about it going into the game, but I thought he had a good game. But I think the real difference today, and he is a real difference maker. And as much as we've been waxing lyrical about Noni Madueke, and this isn't to take anything away from him, the real difference maker today for me in our build-up was Bukayo Saka. The guy was incredible. He was everywhere. He was popping up on the left, popping up in central areas, carrying the ball down the right wing with such ease, willing to take on Dan Burn at every given opportunity. And after half-time, particularly once Newcastle had their noses in front, they were desperate to try and stop us going down that right-hand side, and they ended up shifting into a back five to make sure that, Saka couldn't isolate Dan Burn as often. So, when people are sort of making moves to try and counteract you, and they're making moves to try and, to stifle you first and foremost before they're playing their own game. And this was a conversation that we had around the City game last week as well. I remember sort of touching on some comments that Clive Palmer made where he said, the fact that teams are sort of sitting off us and dropping off us, what does that tell us about our attack? And I was kind of like, well, I understand that. But if you flip that conversation around, if you turn the glass over, essentially, you could make the case that, no, actually, they do respect us and they do worry about us. And that's why they're taking measures to try and prevent us causing them damage. So you can look at that from whatever way you want. But I thought Saka today was outstanding. That's as good as I've seen Bukayo Saka play in probably a year, man. And I know he didn't get the goal and I know he didn't get the assist, but just his relentless nature down that right-hand side, his ability to take people on, some of the combination play with others, and his sort of fluency in his movement was great to see. Like, there were times where he was popping up in Eze's position and Eze was going wide. And that just that rotation, that cohesion, and that understanding, that telepathy that comes when you got lots of creatives that are all on the same wavelength, all playing in a similar area of the pitch. And I've said it over and over again. We have got the defensive structure to be able to put those guys out on the pitch and say, go and do you. We've got that defensive solidity. Timber, outstanding. Again, one of the best 1v1 defenders you'll find in the world. Gabriel comes up trumps again after a good, solid defensive performance. Saliba comes on at half-time. No problem. Mosquera starts for most of the first half, with the exception of that one mistake. Mosquera didn't put a foot wrong. And again, that's why I'm keen to emphasize the point of I don't want to see him scapegoated because he was substituted at half-time. Rice and Zubimendi as a pair, it just worked brilliantly. It had that perfect balance to it today. It was excellent. I've criticized Zubi a bit as well. Maybe not criticized, because that feels like I've sat here and said he's no good or anything. I've not said that. I've always said that he's a fantastic technical player. I've just wondered if physically he's got what it takes to go to places exactly like St. James's Park. And I said earlier in the week, if he goes there and he's comfortable and he's strong and he imposes himself up against that midfield of Joe Linton, Bruno Guimaraes and Tonali, I will tip my hat to him, and I'm going to do exactly that. Because there isn't a more physically dominant midfield in the Premier League, I don't think, than those guys. And when you go up there, it's no holds barred. They can do whatever they want, apparently. So that means that, you've really got to be strong and tough. And Zubimendi showed that, and he produced some excellent passes. I mean, that dink that he produced for Timber when we were 1-0 down, obviously Timber's header was saved down to his right by Nick Pope. That was just one of a long list of really good saves that sort of Nick Pope made on the day. But that just kind of demonstrated Zubi's technical brilliance after a game in which we'd had to watch him battle for a lot of it. So that midfield, I really, really enjoyed it. Those two working together and just giving Eze that little bit more license. But again, Declan's athleticism is really, really key in that. The substitutions were really, really good today because they worked again. And I'm kind of torn here, right? Because whenever we talk about substitutions, there's a part of me that wants to go, all hail and all praise Mikel because he got them right today, because he keeps making changes and those changes keep coming off the bench and impacting games. It's partly that he's making the right changes at the right times, but it's also partly because of the squad that we now have. And that's what gives me the most encouragement. The fact that we are starting to feel it out. We're starting to figure out, Mikel Arteta is starting to work out what needs to change and when and who's best to do that. And I can't work out if he's sort of developed that lately as a coach, that ability to do that, because I suppose in the past he's never really had the luxury of such a strong group and squad. And therefore, he's always had to kind of work in a different way. Now he's got to adapt to working with a bigger group, working with a bigger squad. And it feels like, okay, it's taken a few weeks, but I feel like today we got to a point where we were really reaping the rewards and benefits of this squad, because, we also knew how to use it right. Arteta is evolving, says Thomas in the chat. Arteta always evolves. Whether you like the way he's evolving, that's another debate, right? Because some people will tell you that when he first came in, we were quite defensive. Then in that first season, we challenged for the title. We were brilliant and really entertaining. And now we've kind of gone back to a more defensive sort of mindset, a more pragmatic approach. But then today, he was told to take the handbrake off by pretty much everyone and their dog, and he did exactly that. And Arsenal were brilliant again. So is this another evolution in the life cycle of Mikel Arteta? I don't know. But obviously having that really strong squad, it makes a difference. Mikel Merino, right? Mikel Merino has had untold amounts of criticism this season. And it's never actually been because Mikel Merino's not played well. And I've always tried to make this point and emphasize this point. It's to do with what people want to see from their midfield and the balance that people crave. And Mikel Merino can't always give you that from the start of a game. I've always said that. Okay, but Mikel Merino is an impact player, my word. That header that he produces there to draw Arsenal level is outstanding. Outstanding. The way he gets in front of the defender, works with the brilliant cross that Declan Rice has put in, and just glances it towards that far post, knowing that Pope's going to struggle with it. It's brilliant. It's an excellent finish. He's got a knack of getting into the right places at the right times. He's a very, very intelligent footballer. You have to be able to read the game that well. And he's got such a variety of finishes in his locker. And he produces another brilliant one to draw us level. And obviously the Arsenal players have read some of the stuff that's been written, listened to some of the stuff that's been said, because once that goal went in, there was about 10 seconds of celebration, and then it was, let's get on with it. Let's go on and win this. And Gary Neville, right? Gary Neville was so desperate, man. He was so desperate, Gary Neville, right? To try and piss on our parade, that when that ball went in the back of the net and we're having that moment of, come on, the penalty decision's gone against us. It hasn't been our day, but we ain't going to be beaten. Mikel Merino comes off the bench, makes a difference. And rather than allowing us to enjoy it and to just bask in it for a couple of minutes, this is Gary Neville straight away. I can't do his accent. I'm not going to even attempt to do it. But in his voice, I was going to say something else there. In his voice, he says, oh, well, this is the kind of game that champions go on and win now. Come on. Like, there is some validity to that point, okay? But say it when we're about to kick off. Say it when we're about to go again. Say it when you look at the clock and you realize there's 10 minutes or so plus stoppage time to go. Say it then. That was his first reaction. Rather than to praise Mikel Merino for the brilliance, rather than to praise the delivery, his first reaction was to talk about what we need to do next. Because every time we tick a box, there'll be another one created. Every time we overcome a hurdle, they'll go and put another one in front of us. Now, again, listen, these narratives that exist around Arsenal, until we win things, they're always going to be there. But if you cannot see what they are trying to do to us in terms of just creating a negativity, creating rage bait, clickbait, all the rest of it, then I don't know what you people are watching. And honestly, I think it's time that as a group of supporters, we just block that crap out and get behind our team and realize that whenever, that stuff is being said, it's being said for a reason. It's being said because there's nothing more profitable, more clickable than a pissed off Arsenal fan. And that is what, they're driven by ultimately. So don't allow it to kind of infiltrate us as a fan base to the point where we're arguing with one another and all the rest of it because of a clear wind-up job. Like that's just kind of what I'll say on that. So it's 1-1. We go back to halfway. We kick off again. We've made loads of changes, very offensive changes. And you wonder then if we've got what it takes to go on and win the game. You also start to wonder if there's a potential and a chance that we're going to get caught out. And I think at 1-1 was when Newcastle had their penalty shout. And I've already talked about that, I think, at the beginning of the pod. I think I did it on this one and not on the one that we had to bin because the stream died. But yeah, correct me if I haven't, but I'm pretty sure we went through those incidents in a lot of detail. So then you're wondering if Arsenal could do it and they go and force a corner late on in the game. Now, on the subject of corners and set pieces, there's a stat floating around tonight which says that 58% of our goals this season are set pieces. Who cares, man? Who cares? Like in games where we've struggled to create chances and we've nicked them 1-0 based on a set piece, Old Trafford being the prime example this season, then you worry about creativity and you worry about the fact that such a high volume of your goals are coming from set pieces. But on a day like today, when you create the way that we did, when you work the goalkeeper over and over again the way that we did, when you actually score the same number of goals as your XG, which we don't always do, you got to sort of just put that to one side. That's agenda-driven stuff again. Forget about it. 58% of our goals are all set pieces. I didn't know that set pieces were not valid in football. I mean, everybody's got a set piece, coach. Everybody's reverted back to long throw-ins. I was covering a Serie A game today, and what were Roma doing? Set piece, elaborate set piece routines and launching long throws into the penalty area. Which reminds me, on the subject of long throws, how have I forgotten to talk about this all this time? I hope, by the way, that someone snuck in to the referee's changing room after the game and nicked Jared Gillett's towel. What was that about? Like, have you ever seen a referee run over to a player that's got a towel to dry a ball and take it off of him and go and put it back? Have you ever seen that? Now, some people were sort of highlighting on X during the game that there is apparently a rule or a law in the game that says you can't do that. Man, my eyes must be playing tricks on me, but I'm pretty sure I saw that happen yesterday in the Premier League. I'm pretty sure I saw it happen yesterday in the Crystal Palace game. Like it's just Thomas nails it in the chat. It's just the petulance of it all. Like, okay, if there is a law there, that law's probably existed for a while. I've never in my life seen it enforced. Just like I never, ever, ever saw anybody shown a second yellow card for flicking the ball away until it was an Arsenal player that did it. Like, rival fans and people out there will say we're paranoid and we're this and we're that. There's just so many examples of where we get the brunt of some new law or initiative before everybody else does. Leave our towels alone, as Rumble says in the live chat. Genuinely, though, how funny would it be if someone from Arsenal snuck into the officials' changing room and nicked Jared Gillett's towel while he was in the shower? Incredible. Anyway, Gabi's towering header. It's just trademark Gabi. It's brilliant from William Saliba as well, because he does a really, really good job of just making life difficult for Nick Pope. Also, if you watch the goal back from the angle of where the corner's taken from, you'll actually see, right, that there was so much wrestling, pulling, pushing, shoving going on from the Newcastle players. We'd have never got anything for it because we saw someone gauge one of our players' eyes out. I think it was Gyokeres earlier in the game, and that was absolutely fine. Remember, there's a different rule book up at St. James's Park. But yeah, it was just so good because I think Gabi let himself down a little bit with the way he went down, as I've mentioned for the Voltemada goal. It wasn't his most solid game. His heart must have been in his mouth when they were checking. The VAR was looking at that incident where it came off of his hand, of his arm. I think he really needed that and really deserved it. I said it wasn't his most solid game. He was still good, but he wasn't as good as I've seen him at other points and at other times. Look, I guess for me, the kind of overarching point here today is what a squad we have, what a spirit we have. And we've got a very, very good coach who will adapt and who will adjust and who will find a way of getting the maximum out of this squad. Why am I confident in that? Because he's done that time and time again with lesser groups, with weaker groups. He challenged for a Premier League title when we really had no right. And I know there are a lot of naysayers, and I'm as guilty as anybody of at times just falling into the trap of being a little bit reactionary. But you know what? It's because I care. So we're all entitled to a little bit of that. We're all entitled at times to allow emotion to dictate our analysis. But every now and again, we will get reminders like today of just how good a squad we have, just how good a coach we have, and just how great a group of guys we've got in terms of that spirit and that togetherness. and back them, man. Support them, because yesterday, when you woke up on Saturday morning, the narrative probably would have been Arsenal are about to go 8 points behind Liverpool, and this is it. And then you fast forward to Sunday night as we're recording this, and we're 2 points behind them. That is a massive swing. And those swings, they can happen, and they can happen quickly. And, you can sort of go from feeling one type of way to a completely different type of way within the space of 24 hours. And that's why you've got to try and keep some sort of level of balance in your analysis and in your thoughts. We watched Arsenal struggle in attack for a few games. That's where that frustration came from for me. We all felt that the team selection against City was just a little bit too safe. And then we go to Newcastle, and obviously Manchester City are a better team than Newcastle. But we go to Newcastle, where we've historically struggled in recent history, at least, and we do something very, very different, and we perform to a level that I don't think we've reached all season up until this point. So yeah. Rumble says, today gave me some belief again. I was feeling down after City, like we blew it. Yogan, and this is a really, really interesting question. I think we'll probably wrap up on this. We will bring you another pod tomorrow, and we'll pick some themes from the game, and we'll sort of deep dive into those a little bit more. But what were my thoughts on Viktor Gyokeres? I thought he worked incredibly hard. I thought he battled incredibly hard. I thought he was a little bit unlucky on a few instances not to get a shot off. I'm not saying he's there yet, because I don't think he is. I still think there's more to come from Viktor Gyokeres. I think he's a little bit more clunky than some people probably thought he was. But you could just see something in his eyes today that he was desperate to have an impact. The way he celebrated the Gabriel goal with him as well, that was telling. I think he feels part of the group now. I think he feels at home. I think he's desperate to shut people up. Again, we talked about his goal record, and there is a bit of stat padding with a couple at home against Leeds. But we're talking about Viktor Gyokeres that's got 3 and 6, 1 and 2 first season in the Premier League. And if other people are contributing, that isn't going to be such a major talking point. I think a bit like the way we were waiting for the team to just kind of click in terms of that attack. And I feel like that's happened today. I feel like we're just waiting for that moment for Viktor Gyokeres. I think he will come good. I think he was probably more involved today. And that was as a consequence of our attack just being a lot more fluid and working much better overall. But he was a lot more involved today. And that's what you want from a striker. We know he can score goals. We know he can hit the back of the net. He's made a career out of doing that. He's done it for years. What we need is to have him involved in the games. And today was the first time where I felt like he was really, really involved. I felt he was quite involved in the first half out in Bilbao. I think his match fitness is improving. And I thought today was the first game where he was really kind of in the thick of the action all the time. Just needs something to go his way. Just needs something to break for him. And I'm sure it will in the not too distant future. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for bearing with me as well when I had all sorts of internet problems a little bit earlier on. Virgin Media will be getting a stern email and phone call from me tomorrow. So, yeah. Feel sorry for you, whoever it is that's going to pick up the phone at Virgin. No, I'm joking. But I will be having a word because this happened a lot this week. I did one of those service checks, and apparently there's an intermittent issue in my area, but that's not really my problem, is it? So get it sorted, for God's sakes. Anyway, just a couple of things to say before I go. I can't believe we've gone through the whole pod without saying these things. First of all, actually, there's a super chat. Let me just read this super chat from Jamal, who says, Gabi will get the plaudits, rightfully so, after a shaky first half, in my opinion. But that Saliba sub will go under the radar. It really platformed and stabilized our possession. Mikel Arteta coached the win from start to finish. Yeah, I agree with that. And I kind of touched on that earlier, didn't I? I said that I felt like the Saliba sub did give us something. But what I didn't want is it to become a let's have a go at sort of Christian Mosquera. The fact that we've won means that that's probably less likely to happen, but I think it's important to highlight that. Jamal, thank you so much, mate, for your very, very kind contribution to the show. Really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Just before I sign out, a couple of things to say. Like the video if you haven't done so already. First time I've gone this long in a stream without saying it. Subscribe to the channel as well if you're brand new. That really really does help. If you want to go one further, you want to get access to our pods ad-free, as well as exclusive content, the next piece of which will be dropping tomorrow. Click on this QR code. Am I pointing at it? There we go. There, you can do it that way, or you can click the link in the description. That'll take you over to patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. Help us to bring you more and more Arsenal content. And we'll have a video analysis piece dropping tomorrow based on Sunday's game. So that'll be dropping Monday, depending on when you're listening to this. Like, subscribe if you're on Apple or Spotify and you're listening in. Please do leave us a review as well. I will see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Up the Arsenal. What a win. What a win.